Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Anyway, February is almost over, so before the month wraps up, I wanted to go ahead and take one episode to honor some really iconic figures for Black History Month. This particular episode is going to delve into three really iconic figures from more modern history, the 1960s all the way up through the 20-teens. And these three people these four people really, have led incredibly impactful lives, but in thoroughly different ways. And I really liked that aspect of each of these individuals. Anyway, as always, these recommendations are available entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. So without any further ado, let's get to the recs. Okay, so we are going to start off super strong. This first pick is available via our Canopy service, and it is actually more about the host than the show, though the show itself is absolutely amazing. And I am referring it to 1983 to 2006's Reading Rainbow. Reading Rainbow is an unbelievable show. I grew up with it. I absolutely adored any time it was on. I was just enamored with each of the books that the show covered. But what made this so special was the host. And the host, of course, is LeVar Burton. Now, LeVar Burton is one of those figures that I think has received sort of this cult of celebrity around it. He, of course, became really quite prominent in mainstream media after he was cast as Kunta Kinte in Roots, which is still one of the most watched television miniseries of all time. After Roots, of course, he ended up being cast in Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is globally beloved. He's one of those people almost everyone can recognize from some project or other. And despite being part of these two globally known, beloved series, when asked what is the project you are most proud of, he pretty much always says Reading Rainbow. And literacy for youth in general has been such a huge passion project of him from the beginning. He's actually one of the producers, even early on. And that show started in 83. That's very clearly a sign of this kind of thing being a passion for him. Children's education was huge for him, for his parents, or for his mother, for his family, and it definitely shows. So Reading Rainbow, if you are not at all familiar with the format of the show, introduces these children's books. They are read, and your child is able to see and read along with the book, just like a videoed story time. But what makes it super special and what changes things a little bit is that, after the story, Burton then goes through several shots of different footage that are all tied to whatever the theme of that children's book was. So I still remember there was a book about an animal cafe that was only open at night. So Burton's activities that surrounded it in the episode all it had to do with the nightlife of New York City, and he introduced and interviewed people who worked at night, and it was just that sort of little connection to the real world that made such an impact. Like I said, I still remember reading a lot of these books as a child with the show. And it's been 30 plus years since I've seen most of these episodes. I did go back and watch a couple. Seasons 1 and seasons 3 are available through Canopy. The other fantastic thing about watching Reading Rainbow via Canopy is it's part of our Canopy Kids Unlimited service. Unlimited service, if you are not already familiar, is one of those parts of Canopy where you can watch however many times you want and whatever you want. So even though you're given 15 viewing tickets per month, you can still use all 15 of those on all of our other critically award-winning grown-up series or TV shows or films. and you or your children or both of you can enjoy as much Reading Rainbow and as much rewatching of Reading Rainbow as you would like. There are other series and fantastic films all available through that Unlimited Kids project as well, but I mean, it's really, really wonderful. Kids do tend to rewatch things, at least in my experience. So you can feel free to let them happily watch however many episodes of Reading Rainbow as they would like. And again, I just want to draw things back to Burton. The fact that this project ran for 20 years, he still works on side projects that are sort of vaguely associated with Reading Rainbow. I know that there was some movement away from using that actual title due to like copyright claim and things, but his passion for early literacy is still alive and is still, very, very active. So yes, my very first pick for this week's episode is going to be Reading Rainbow via our Canopy service. 100% check it out. If you haven't seen it in years, go back, watch. There's a wonderful vibe of nostalgia about it. Totally worth it. Must watch. Okay, so my second pick is also available via our Canopy service, and that is 2015's A Ballerina's Tale. Now, it does not matter if you are a fan of dance, if you are not a fan of dance, if you know everything there is to know about ballet or nothing. This documentary is really so fascinating solely because of the figure it follows, and that is the iconic ballerina, Misty Copeland. So Copeland's big claim to fame is that she was the very first African-American woman named a principal ballet dancer in the incredible American Ballet Theater Company. ABT is often regarded as one of the best ballet companies in the country, if not the world, and it had been 70 years in existence before this happened. She had to overcome incredible difficulties in order to get to where she was. But the really fascinating part of her life really starts when she was quite young, because unlike most ballet dancers, particularly successful ballet dancers, she did not start training as a ballerina until she was a teenager. That is very, very rare. And this documentary gives us this fascinating behind-the-scenes look at her life, her day-to-day routine, but really how she ended up rocketing to fame so quickly, and the things that she had to do, the things she had to give up, the struggles, the strains, the trials and tribulations. And there are many. Like, this documentary views in some ways like a fictional film, because so much is happening and so much had to be done to become this iconic ballerina. The interviews are really, really candid. They feel very organic. It does not seem like a puff piece. And I had been quite concerned. I'd not watched this before I was prepping, and I had read a few interviews. I'd seen quite a few videos with her dancing and always thinking that she was unbelievable. But, to really see, some of the bits and pieces that made her, it's really, really fascinating. And, you become very attached very quickly. That was one of the things that I found really compelling about this documentary, is that you empathize with her so fast. I just really thought it was a very, very well done film. But more than that, I thought the subject matter was just something that will stay with me. I had already been very aware of Copeland's work, but I didn't necessarily know all of the things that she had to go through. So it just really opened my eyes to her as a performer in general. You get to see so much more, and so much more of what made her what she is, and how inspirational her life is, and how she uses a lot of her prominence to really, make a difference. And I think that's really, really incredible. So again, whether you are a fan of dance or not, you 100% should check out the documentary A Ballerina's Tale. It is, once again, available via our Canopy service and is an absolute must watch. Okay, the last pick for this week is available on our Hoopla service, and this one is 2011's documentary The Loving Story. Now, the story of Richard and Mildred Loving has been adapted into, many, many different forms of media, but this documentary is absolutely amazing. It views like a standard film. There is no surprise that it was critically acclaimed. It was Oscar shortlisted. It is just a phenomenal, phenomenal documentary. But it is not as phenomenal as the figures that it features. As mentioned, Richard Loving and Mildred Loving, these two have changed history. In 1967, the court case Loving versus Virginia was a landmark decision that ended up legalizing interracial marriage within the U.S. It obviously changed the landscape of a lot of things. And you really feel that impact all the way through this film. Because while it is a documentary, at its heart, it's a love story. It is a romance. I've watched this documentary many times. I've watched the more standard film with Joel Edgerton. I mean, but this is, and I've watched a couple of PBS specials, but this one is the one that I go back to because it just is so impactful. Watching the interviews with Mildred and Richard together, it really is just one of those documentaries I recommend to everyone. It's so well crafted. In addition to the topic being so relevant, it's just a very really phenomenally well made film. We get to hear the two of them talk, and yes, this is brought up often. The two of them are very, very different people, but very clearly you understand why they struggled so hard to stay together, to be able to be married. Mildred is always much more effusive, much more willing to talk, and Richard's much more taciturn. But whenever he speaks, it's so succinct and it's so to the point. And it's so clear throughout the entire documentary that he has no clue why anyone thinks he should not be allowed to be married to this woman that he's in love with. It is so blatantly clear, and it's just that in and of itself is so powerful. And it can't be replicated. That's the thing that I think when I've watched the adaptations, nothing reaches inside and grabs me the way that those little moments do. There are interviews with the attorneys that they worked with, people that they knew at the time. It's just a really, really organic feeling film. It does talk about like some of the nitty gritty bits of like the legal proceedings, but it really does just focus on the two of them, on the concept of why should anyone have had the right to tell these two people that they couldn't be married. And it just, like I said, it's just such an impactful, beautiful, beautiful film. And if you are a history buff, you 100% should watch this. If you are a romance film fan, this is something that I think will stay with you, that will move you, that will make you think, that will definitely, open your eyes to a struggle that I think a lot of us who are alive today don't necessarily even have recall for, because it's not necessarily something that we have to think about in our day-to-day lives, whether or not, because the two of them were not allowed to be married. Like they could not live where they were had grown up. They could not, it's just, like I mentioned, one of those documentaries I think everybody should watch. So again, if you get the chance, 100% you must watch The Loving Story, available on Hoopla. It is phenomenal, phenomenal film. All right, so those were my picks for this week. If you have any other recommendations for films that you think really honor Black History Month, please make a comment below. Share those opinions. Really would love to hear them. If you have any recommendations for themes you'd like to see me cover in the future, definitely share those as well. As always, thank you so, so much for joining me. I loved putting together this week's picks, and there are a slew of other recommendations available out there. Definitely check them out. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and sign off on this episode. Again, thank you for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next week. Bye-bye.